When we say defund the police, there's a lot of people that like to frame it as an anarchist conversation. But what we know as black and brown bodies in this America is that policing never equated to safety for us. I've never felt protected or served by any officers in MPD or any of the other police forces and municipalities that I've visited across this America. So when we say defund the police, for people who cannot understand the nuances in that conversation, what we're saying is revisit public safety. Create systems that actually protect and serve, not just some, but all. Right now, policing in this America is disproportionately biased to affect black and brown bodies, to cage black and brown bodies, to harm black and brown bodies, but not to protect us. When we say defund the police, it means to revisit public safety systems in favor of a thing that translates to justice for all, not justice for some. When we say abolish, it's the understanding that police are funded with taxpayer dollars. Police stations stand up because of taxpayer dollars. They get new cruisers, shields, etc. because of taxpayer dollars. That means that they are a service. And they're a service that is answerable to us. If they're not answerable to us in the ways that we want, we could demand new service, and that's what this is. Abolish the police in favor of whatever that new service will be, whatever that new service is that resembles justice that the people decide on.
Took the words right out of all of our mouths. Welcome to Stir Crazy, everybody. The video you just saw was shot over the weekend in Washington, D.C. by citizen journalist Chuck Modiano, and the gentleman there just articulated it perfectly, especially in the wake of what has happened in America over the past few days, with ongoing protests happening in Kenosha, where Donald Trump is visiting Kenosha today, despite elected officials telling him to stay away. And he also has no plans to speak with Jacob Blake's family, but that's okay. The Blake family is doing a counter movement against Trump's visit to Kenosha today, where they're having a voter registration drive, basically a community day, to get off of the focus of Donald Trump being in their city, not there to make things better, of course. But events transpired last night in Los Angeles, where a 29-year-old man by the name of Dijon Kizzy was shot and killed by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, who has also, this exact same department, it's been revealed, and we've got some video about that today. A whistleblower from that agency has come forth and said that there is an internal gang within the LA Sheriff's Department. Part of the reason why Andres Guillermo was shot and killed 5 times in the back earlier this year in California. We're going to get into a lot of that as well. So listen, gang, from Kenosha to Cali, these cops kill for sport, and it's not a game. And here we are about 2 months out from the presidential election. And when it comes to the issue of police brutality and accountability, Donald Trump and Joe Biden sound like the same Bama. And we will get into some of Joe Biden's most recent comments in the fact that he keeps getting attacked by Donald Trump as being part of the radical left. And Joe Biden, in no uncertain terms, made that perfectly clear that he is not a socialist and he is not here to, quote unquote, coddle rioters. Lots to get into. So listen, we appreciate everyone that's watching us right now. Shout out to everyone that's in the chat and in the comments. What's up to all the folks watching on Periscope via Twitter? Time to bring in our fantastic panel. Joining us today, he's a political consultant, also perhaps the next socialist candidate to be governor of California. Adriel Hampton is joining us. And from the People's City Council of Los Angeles, Ricci Sergienko is also here. And of course, our senior correspondent from The Real News to talk about all things politics and give us an update on what's happening in Kenosha. Jaisal Noor is joining us. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for being here on a Stir Crazy Tuesday.
Thank you, Kim.
Excited to be back. We had a fun time last week or 2 weeks ago.
And I think we were even being throttled a little bit, guys. We got some emails, Ricci, about you and Ina's appearance. And like the last 10 minutes, it started to buffer. So listen, gang, if shit starts buffering, if you're in the comments in the chat, say so. Let us know as soon as possible, because we'll try to resolve it. I think the feds was playing games with us, though. That's just my personal take. But I wanted to...
You're not wrong.
No, go ahead, Ricci.
No, it's Ricci, by the way. Not a big
Ricci,
deal. It happens all the time. But you're not wrong about the feds. There's a certain amount of surveillance that goes on with me personally, but now that you have Adriel on, I don't know. Like this stream's getting shut down at some point for sure.
We'll say that. Let's hope not. I mean,
I'm
we
just-
already had the feds was tailing Jaisal. You go to Jaisal's Twitter page. Jaisal will tell you how the feds was on him on the Beltway. It may not be for the same reasons that I think the feds was on Jaisal, but that's a whole nother story. But on a serious note, I want us to start in Los Angeles because the shit went down yet again, where the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department shot and killed 29-year-old Dijon Kizzy in South Central Los Angeles. The details are a little scant, and perhaps Ricci and Adriel can bring us more up to speed. But from what we understand, what has so far been reported, that he was riding his bicycle when the police were allegedly trying to stop him for some sort of bike code violation. And a chase perhaps ensued. The cops are trying to say that he had a handgun wrapped up in some clothes. That has not been confirmed nor verified, but he was shot in the street. And after he was shot, there was some video footage taken by bystanders of police actually handcuffing him after he had was presumed to be dead. They did not, at least from what this video showed, appear to render any aid to him. So from our California contingent, Adriel, let's start with you. What is the latest of what is known about the murder of Dijon Kizzy?
I think Ricci is going to have a better answer to that. He was actually out there last night. You know, I saw the call to action from Black Lives Matter LA to get down there. Ricci and I work together, so every time the cops kill someone, which is very frequently, we're always, you know, looking to make sure Ricci gets home, the protesters get home. I know Ricci spent a lot of long nights making sure that people involved in these protests do make it home, do make it out on bail. Ricci, what happened last night?
So yeah, you're right about the incident, about how it occurred. As far as we know, he was riding his bike, and then something happened. Like you said, it was a helmet code violation, and things transpired where we don't even know if he had a gun on him, though. Like, that's not a confirmed thing. And they left the body out there for like 2 hours, or excuse me, they left the body out there for the entire night, not the entire night, but into the night when people were there. But the body was out there for like hours before people started to show up. So a gun could have been planted at any time. There's no proof that there was a gun. He had a gun on him. And the story goes is that he put his stuff down on the ground and then they shot and killed him. And whether there was a gun wrapped up in what he put down, we can't be entirely sure, but he put his stuff on the ground and then he got shot. I would also like to note, if anyone is looking for pictures of the cops that were involved in the shooting of Mr. Kizzy, you can find them at People's City Council. We're looking to ID those officers as soon as possible because, Kim, you hinted to it earlier, there are a bunch of gangs that are running around in the LA County Sheriff's Department, such as the executioners who shot Andres Guadardo a few months ago. And the dude that shot 18-year-old Andres Guadardo was looking to get into the executioners gang. There's also the Banditos, the Jump Out Boys, a variety of gangs in the LA County Sheriff's Department. So that's just the corrupt system. And then we went down there last night, and the family asked for a peaceful, quiet protest, and a couple hundred people showed up. But the cops, the body was left out there for hours. Like when I showed up at like 8:30ish, the body was still out. And they, you know, Black and brown communities are, harassed, terrorized, and brutalized by police in Los Angeles. In LA, we have the most murderous police forces with the LASD and LAPD combined. And so that's just like that. This happened 5 days ago, and then 2 weeks ago with Anthony McClain. Like, this is a common occurrence in Los Angeles where we don't have any control over the police. They do what they want, and they kill people, they harass people, they terrorize people. That's what they do. That's what they get paid to do.
Dwayne, let's take a look at some of the scenes from last night's actions as shot, Ricci, by you, I would assume, courtesy of the People's City Council of LA's Twitter feed. Let's take a look at those videos.
Dijon Kizzy! Dijon Kizzy! Dijon Kizzy! What the fuck? Don't do it again! Don't do it again! Don't touch her! Get the fuck out! Get the fuck out! Get the fuck out of here! Fucking idiot! Don't touch her! You the ones who fucked up. And now you're mad at us.
Some of the scenes from last night's demonstrations against the police after the murder of Dijon Kizzy. I mean, Ricci, we saw the police there attempting to antagonize protesters, but this has been an ongoing sort of tactic with not only LAPD, but I would assume LASD as well, when people are attending these demonstrations in support of Black lives and against the police. The reason they turn violent is because the police turn them violent.
Of course, and so that, I mean, that's just the common understanding that what the police force in Los Angeles, but also the policing system in this country is. They exist to be violent and brutal. But yeah, even the simplest thing like body cameras, LASD isn't required to wear body cameras right now, and so And you'll note, I want to note this about LASD. You'll notice that a lot of them wear long sleeve shirts, and that's because they're trying to hide their gang tattoos. Anyone watching this should tag LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva and ask to see his tattoos, because we're wondering what gang affiliation he has. And that, yeah, last night we were holding a quiet, peaceful, nonviolent line, and they tried to agitate and they tried to escalate. I think that they realized that there were too many eyes on them at that point. But yeah, it is a thing that happens over and over again, where we will have peaceful, nonviolent protests, and the cops show up, and they're the ones that escalate it. I think last month we almost got kettled in front of the mayor's house. And we were just out there exercising our First Amendment rights, and that's just, what they do, and they're never held accountable. And I also want to bring this up, there are certain reforms that go on with the LAPD, like civilian oversight committees, and they have to wear body cameras, and all of these certain reforms that have already gone in. And it doesn't work. The cops still act however they're going to act. And yeah, the only way to get them from not acting like this is to defund them to the point of abolishing them. And that young man from Washington D.C. had a really good quote, and that whole piece is exactly what defund the police means.
Guys, I want us to take a look, if we could, speaking of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Jaisal, I'm going to get to you in a second, because I know you've done a lot of reporting about policing and are quite familiar with the internal gangs that a lot of police departments tragically have within them that do things routinely illegal and routinely outside the law and routinely terrorize other citizens and civilians. But this video that we're going to watch, it comes from Deputy Art Gonzalez. Okay, now he has filed a whistleblower complaint regarding the Executioners. This is supposedly a gang inside the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department where a prospective member allegedly shot and killed 18-year-old Andres Gerardo earlier this year, shot him in the back. So this is what we're about to see is some video testimony from him, from this deputy who was under oath, and basically blowing the whistle about the so-called rogue cops within the LA Sheriff's Department. Let's take a look at those videos, Dwayne.
How about this latest shooting of Andres Guardado. Was that done by an inked member or a prospect of the executioners?
Prospects.
And who was that prospect? You know?
Lacks foundation. Speculation and conjecture on the part of the witness.
Deputy Vega and Deputy Hernandez. And again, this is common knowledge where they'll say they see a person running with a gun, but then there's never a gun recovered. But then, you know, there's also, in order to apprehend that suspect, there's force involved.
That's such a repetitive theme, Jaisal, that goes through a lot of these incidents when it comes to civilians being killed, unarmed civilians being killed by police, that there was allegations of a weapon and yet a weapon is not recovered. But what is your take of a whistleblower period coming forth out of any given police department? Because that's kind of what we want. In addition to abolition, in addition to defund, you know, hopefully defund begets abolition. But in the interim, it's about the so-called good cops coming forward. And I have no idea whether or not this deputy is actually a good cop or not. I don't know his justifications or his motivations for coming forward. But what he had to say, what is your take on what you just saw?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the details on this this individual, but you know, this country is going through a massive reckoning on one of its founding original sins that, you know, has permeated to this day in how huge sections of the population are treated like second-class citizens, routinely denied rights, and you know, you know, it's great that this person is speaking up. They can expect reprisal. We know that you know, cops that tried to speak up in Baltimore were you know, harassed, shunned. Dead rats were left on their car. You know, being threatened. You know, or even worse. You know, tires slashed. There's all types of you know, repercussions. You know, the thin blue line. You know, is a real thing. And you know what? I mean, it's good to see that, especially in light of how Trump has been defending the actions of not only police but vigilantes as they've attacked and killed protesters. You know, killed people across the country, and you know, it sort of speaks to the significance of Black Lives Matter, because just in the last 48 hours, I've seen, you know, nothing new from Trump, but the fact that he is, you know, the fact that the message of Black Lives Matters is so offensive to him really says something, because I think it is, you know, raising consciousness and awareness. And you know, I mean, the underlying message, as we heard earlier, is that we have a system of economic exploitation which is enforced by police, right? And so this is the foundation that this whole country and economy are built on. And now we're getting a little closer to you know, having some real discussions about you know, about how this country runs, whose benefit, you know, it runs for. So you know, I think that's why Trump is now accusing Black Lives Matter of orchestrating these protests across the country to try to steal the election from him. That's where we're at right now.
Adriel, I know what this whistleblower is saying about the sheriff's department in Los Angeles is not surprising to you, but at the same time, having been someone who has followed this issue, how many times can you recall seeing a cop, a current cop, he's not even a retired cop, he's still police, coming forward and blowing the whistle, pulling the curtain back, shining the light on the illegal actions of his fellow police? And the fact that there's these so-called executioners who are killing citizens in order to get tattoos, to get inked up like true gang members. That must be terrifying to be a person of color on the streets of Los Angeles, knowing that the cops will shoot you just to be in a fucking gang.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking stuff. I was watching that video, I think, just yesterday, and it's incredible that it's coming out just as there's more community pressure around this issue. I was familiar with the allegations about tattooed gang members within the sheriff's department because of the work of the People's City Council and Black Lives Matter LA and their allies, to see an actual deputy under oath confirming that, talking about it, saying that they were involved in this shooting of this young security guard is incredible. Part of my background is I worked as a investigator for the San Francisco City Attorney for several years. And one of the kinds of cases I worked on was when the police would be sued for misconduct or for some kind of damages. And I came across, and this is like more than a decade ago now, I came across that same kind of allegation around SFPD. Not that they had the tattooed gang members. I think that the size of LAPD and the LA Sheriff's Department, they're too damn big, right? They become these giant institutions that have their own criminal element within them, which is just horrifying. In San Francisco, though, I remember reviewing a case about an officer who was accused of injuring someone. And when you looked into his complaint history, he'd done it multiple times. He had a spot where he knew he was off camera. He would attack them. And one of the things he would do is talk about the gang that he grew up in. And his shtick was he would say, "Now I'm the blue gang, motherfucker." And then he would challenge them to a fight, or he would punch. Or one guy, he allegedly ripped out his earrings. Just shocking stuff. And what's crazy is that most of this stuff never sees the light of day because even if it's in citizens' complaints, there's so many of them that it obscures the seriousness of the issues, right? People start talking about the statistics and the numbers, and it's only when you're spending hours and hours of time, sometimes a lot more. As an investigator, I was able to spend more time than a reporter can typically spend on a case, looking into what's really going on. And you see that this is an epidemic problem in these police departments, and in this case, the sheriffs, because they have enough ground in LA County to act more like in San Francisco, the sheriffs just ran the jails.
I mean, Ricci, I look at Los Angeles, and I'd be scared to death of both LAPD and LASD at this point. But it's pretty obvious that it's open season at this point. The cops understand why people have been out in the streets by the hundreds, by the thousands for now weeks, months. Okay, the people are making it crystal clear that they are fed up with this type of conduct from the cops. And at the same time, here they are profiling, assuming Mr. Dijon Kizzy over a bicycle violation, and they end up shooting and killing him, and then going through all these horrible steps, handcuffing him while he's dead, leaving his body in the streets. None of this is by accident or thoughtless or unintentional at this point. What do you think the message from Los Angeles is being sent to the people of that community by the law enforcement there?
Well, the LAPD and the LA Sheriff's Department are a bunch of punks. They're soft as shit. Their lobbying arm has blocked all of us on social media. The sheriff has blocked me personally on social media. And they're an over-militarized police force, and they have guns, and that's how they're gonna set the tone. But people in Los Angeles just aren't putting up with it anymore. And that's as a collective, because Black Lives Matter LA has been doing this work for like seven plus years. And they laid the groundwork for us to be at a point in LA where it's like we're doing everything in our power to get rid of these people, to defund these people, to abolish these people. And that's our positioning on it. And so they're not going to change their position. They're going to be the same police force that they've been for 30 years, which is as a collective, Los Angeles is the most murderous police force in the country. And it's a systematic thing overall around the country, but also in Los Angeles. Like, we have gangs in the sheriff's department. But there was also, 20 years ago, the Rampart scandal, So these things aren't new to Los Angeles. I think that there's more attention being called to it now, and they really aren't changing their ways, but the people are looking at them like, they're a bunch of punks. They come and escalate. They try to fight. They're the ones with the guns. They're the ones with the batons. And it's like, it's going to come to a point where there's going to be enough of us that we're out in the streets, and whether it's this year or next year, a change is coming to Los Angeles.
Gang, I want us to pivot, if we could, from LA back to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where, the shit is still pretty tense in the light of the attempted murder. I don't know what else to call it. You shoot someone 7 times in the back of Jacob Blake by Kenosha police officer Ruslan Chesky. Jaisal, I know you've been following this. There's been so many developments, in addition to the fact that Jacob Blake was being handcuffed while in the hospital, while he's laying in his hospital bed, paralyzed. The police have since taken the restraints off of him. It's unconscionable why you would have a paralyzed man who is receiving intensive hospital care handcuffed in the first place. But clearly the killing of the 2 protesters allegedly by 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, where he was allowed to get all the way back to Illinois after allegedly committing this murder, and is being held currently in juvenile detention, and seemingly is going to assert a self-defense defense in response to these murder charges that he's facing. What is the latest happening in Kenosha that you're aware of?
Yeah, it's sort of hard to keep everything straight when you have a president who claims he is, enforcing law and order, defending the actions of a teenager who illegally had a gun, illegally crossed state lines with that gun. No one asked him to be there on the street that day. And he's charged with multiple crimes. Trump, this is who Trump is defending. And, it is shocking in the moment to see this. But of course, we know this is his routine. This guy, Kyle Rittenhouse, was a Trump supporter. He was a big backer of the Blue Lives Movement, the Blue Lives Matter movement, whatever that even means. You've seen Trump, you've seen conservative media, influential figures like Tucker Carlson, rally to this man's defense because, this is their ideal demographic. This is a young man who was radicalized online by these Facebook groups and these conspiracy theories, and just was at a front row in a Trump rally earlier this year, and answering Trump's calls, right? Because Trump is round the clock warning about the violence in these cities. These cities are looting and there's rioting. We saw it happen in Portland. A right-wing militia member was killed after Trump incited the Patriot Prayer, who don't live in Portland. These are people from the armed militia from rural parts of the state, drive in, attack Black Lives Matter protesters. It's all documented. And yet, again, these are the people that Trump is praising. Of course, Trump was told not to come to Kenosha today. He hadn't contacted the family of those that have been killed. This is, and so, he went and surveyed the damage. His whole thing is about his whole, campaign thing right now is how Biden is not condemning looting, which, Biden went out of his way to do yesterday and has several times before. Met with his select group of people at a round table where he asked for a former chief of staff, which hasn't worked for him for a while, and then told people to take off their masks inside. Doubled down on his attacks on protesters, saying they're all rioters and looters, and really sort of defending the structural violence. So it's important to frame it as Trump is defending violence. He's promoting violence. That's what he really means by law and order. It is the oppression of Black and brown people and poor people. And, we know that no matter what Trump really says, it's going to be, 43% of Republicans are going to vote for him anyway. But Wisconsin is one of these battleground states. It has 10 electoral votes, but it's one of the few states in this country that actually swings between Democrat and Republican. Republicans, they have massive voter disenfranchisement there. 2016, some 200,000 votes were not counted. Somewhere that Hillary Clinton bypassed in the general election and ended up losing to Donald Trump. So we know why he's there. He's trying to rile up his base. He, I guess, sees himself as profiting or benefiting from violence. And, that's why, people told him not to come, but there he is.
And there the fuck he is, sounding like a goddamn idiot out there in Kenosha. I watched a bit of his live stream. He was, doing some sort of roundtable, and he was pledging money to police. He was thanking the Kenosha Police Department for their service. He was doing everything he could to make sure that law enforcement was well aware that he absolutely stands with them in both deed, word, and checkbook. But the thing is, especially when it comes to this issue, obviously there are glaring differences between Donald Trump and Joe Biden when it comes to things like, let's say, the coronavirus and how they would have handled those situations, assuming, I hope, differently than how Trump has just fucked it all up. But when it comes to this issue of protesting and cops, they sound a lot alike. Dwayne, let's lead off with V4. Let's check out this press conference that Joe Biden gave. He's back on the campaign trail. He was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I don't know who in the hell he was talking to. It looked like he was in a room by himself. But he just said things that I'm like, for real, Joe Biden? For real, Joe Biden? Dwayne, V4, please.
I want to make it absolutely clear, something very clear about all of this. Rioting is not protesting. Looting is not protesting. Setting fires is not protesting. None of this is protesting. It's lawlessness, plain and simple. And those who do it should be prosecuted. Violence will not bring change. It will only bring destruction. It's wrong in every way. It divides instead of unites. Destroys businesses, only hurts the working families that serve the community. It makes things worse across the board, not better. No, it's not what Dr. King or John Lewis taught, and it must end. You know me. You know my heart. You know my story, my family story. Ask yourself, do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really? I want a safe America, safe from COVID, safe from crime and looting, safe from racially motivated violence, safe from bad cops. I am not banning fracking. Let me say that again. I am not banning fracking, no matter how many times Donald Trump lies about me. This future, the future, that's what this is all about.
Wow. Okay. Well, I was hoping we could take those clips apart one by one, but thank you to whoever edited them all together. It's fine. Pop up that tweet from Bree Newsom if you could, Dwayne. When Joe Biden talks about lawlessness and how rioters won't be tolerated and how looting won't be tolerated, Bree Newsom Bass is a activist, wonderful young lady who took down the Confederate flag over the South Carolina state capitol some years ago. This is what she had to say today. She said, law and order equals police breaking laws, participating in drug dealing, in the fleecing of folks, beating their spouses, assaulting and killing people with impunity, tear gassing people when they protest. Lawlessness, what Joe Biden is talking about, is poor folks looting a store during a riot sparked by police violence. And this is the point that I think all of these politicians are missing on purpose, is that there would not be people out in the streets breaking up shit, burning up shit, if it wasn't the police out there shooting people in the fucking back. If the cops would stop shooting people, guess what? People would not be out in the streets doing behaviors that the betters, I suppose, the Joe Bidens of the world, the Kamala Harrises of the world, look down upon that behavior and say that that is not a protest, which I think is arrogant as fuck. For someone like Joe Biden to even reference Dr. King or John Lewis. Listen, people have different strategies when it comes to this thing. And let's we not forget, okay, Martin Luther King was all about nonviolence. And what did he get for his trouble? Shot the fuck dead. So stop putting Dr. King out there as the model of how to demonstrate nonviolently when he met his end with violence, regardless of how peaceful he was trying to be. But Adriel, let's start with you. Everything about that little montage we just saw from Joe Biden is certainly enough to perhaps turn people off who may not already be on the side of Joe Biden being the next president.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a difficult spot. One, he really is misrepresenting Dr. King, who said that the riot is the language of the unheard, right? So what we're seeing is like when you can't get the police to change through reforms, what is left? I think that the thing that concerns me most as a political consultant is Joe Biden letting Trump define the terms. So that speech is basically a defense against, even down to the I'm not going to ban fracking, like asshole, like your entire base wants you to ban fracking. So why would you ever say that? Like all it's going to do is hurt you. Their campaign, it's very painful because one of the campaigns I work on is a Vote Trump Out campaign. And I'm familiar with Bree Newsom in the last few days, making kind of a tweet storm about how we have to get rid of Trump so that we can not have to constantly defend against increasing fascism. But the Biden basically is playing to that middle piece of people who are like, well, can the fascist keep things a little bit more calm? And Biden's like, no, the liberals will keep things a little more calm. And so he's playing right in Trump's turf instead of trying to carve out something that is different than what the GOP promises and says, because Trump is going to continue to lie about what he's done. Lower information voters, which is most of the electorate, will buy a lot of those lies. And we're not getting an inspiring vision from Joe Biden. We're getting this defensiveness and this repudiation of things that Trump has said. And, meanwhile, on the left, I hear people saying, we wish Joe Biden was more like what Trump says he is.
Ricci, as someone who has been out in the streets all summer and even beforehand, when you hear Joe Biden and Donald Trump basically almost having the exact same talking points, they are against lawlessness. I mean, Joe Biden said, I'm here to keep you safe from COVID. I'm glad he led with COVID, but then he said crime and looting. I mean, he is appealing to a very specific demographic when he talks about crime and looting in order to instill fear that it's so odd for Trump and Biden to both be claiming to be the candidates of law and order when I just know that equals bad news for Black and brown people and people who have been exercising their rights in the streets against this police brutality and violence.
Yeah, well, I mean, one, Joe Biden is the architect of the 94 crime bill. So that's just who he is. And I hope Adriel is actually impressed with me with this answer. Is that although he is playing at Trump's terms, they are that campaign is specifically targeting not my demographic. They're not, and they're not like young people. They're not targeting young people or leftists, as I would say. And it's kind of it's turned into a thing where progressives are having to rally on their own and build coalitions to push Joe Biden. But Joe Biden's the architect of the 94 crime bill. A few weeks ago, he said he included anarchists in a statement. He condemned anarchists. Anarchism is just an ideology, to classify people and to condemn an ideology like that is extremely dangerous. But I think that Joe Biden isn't going. The Biden campaign, the Biden-Harris campaign, is not going for people who want to defund the police or abolish police or radically change and reform the criminal justice system. Kamala Harris was a tough on crime prosecutor. So that is just like the ticket that we're given. But also, I don't view politicians as one set piece and one set ideology. I view them as chips for the streets to move, for the movement to move. And whoever it is on the left that is in office, it's our job to put pressure on them, because they're not going to do it on their own.
Yeah. And so, we know that, voters picked Joe Biden because they thought that he'd be the safe choice against Donald Trump. That was defeating Donald Trump was the top priority for Democrats this season. We know that, in states like New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders won. Voters there were inspired by Bernie's message and also thought that he was the best one to take on Trump. Voters in southern states, didn't agree. And so we obviously ended up in a different direction. Folks that follow this stuff know that a lot of this policy is set on a local level anyway. So what the feds are going to do is going to be really limited and, hasn't made a big difference. Spending some money here and there, sending some guidelines out. A lot of this stuff is governed, law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, et cetera. That's all state and local level material. The one thing that helps Biden's case is that Trump is, a complete lunatic. He's saying that, he literally on TV said that there are planes full of thugs traveling state lines to cause anarchy and looting. And it was just discovered today that was like a 4-month-old random Facebook post someone made that went viral that Trump is picking up on. There's nothing true or factual that comes out of this man's mouth. He's making up conspiracy. He's already setting it up that he's not going to accept the election results, right? He's already made that clear. He's going to say that the ballots were rigged, the mail-in votes were rigged, and we're headed towards a constitutional crisis in a few months. So that's where we're at right now. Yeah, it's going to be really hard for Trump. In the same interview, Trump was saying that, Biden's causing this lawlessness, but then later, this interview on Fox, then he criticized Biden for the crime bill, saying it was too tough on African Americans. So, it's hard to understand what Trump's strategy is, except to try to, appeal to people's most base instincts. Today in Kenosha, he said that the protesters, where there's protesters, there's raping and murdering, and we know that this stuff appeals, fear, danger, the threat of being raped, threat of looting your home or your business looted. Those are the base instincts that have appeals, that draw voters. We know that. And so that's why Trump still has a shot to win this, right? He's only down 4 points in Wisconsin, despite everything that's going on. He's been outspent in Wisconsin 8-1. But this is where we are as a country right now, and it's really depressing. But what's inspiring is that there are amazing organizers and activists on the ground across the country that are putting in the hard work, that are educating people, and that are explaining what the reality is that progressives, people on the left, face a really tough decision on the ballot box. But for a lot of people, especially in swing states, their top priority has to be to beat Trump, to get a lot of votes out. Otherwise, people fear that it's going to be a lot tougher on the left. If Trump does win re-election, I don't doubt for 1 second there's going to be a massive crackdown on Black Lives Matter. That's what Rand Paul, called for. This libertarian Rand Paul just called for that on Fox News this morning. He wants to called for preemptive arrests on Black Lives Matter protesters because they're crossing state lines and sending thugs into cities. That's literally where we are as a country right now. It is totally insane.
Especially when the Kenosha shooter was from out of state and killed people.
Illegally crossed state lines to kill people. And, and then Trump is saying that, that he was being chased when in fact he only got chased after he killed somebody. And the video evidence is there, but you have this denial of reality that 43% of our voting public will believe. And so the fight is on for whatever that middle ground is. And the risk of Biden's strategy is that it's going to suppress votes in states like Wisconsin by not appealing to activists. So that's going to be the challenge, for organizers.
You made a point about that these are local and state decisions often about how we regulate our police departments and definitely how we fund them. The federal government can give more funds, but they're not going to be the ones to defund the police. In California, though, we had our state legislature basically pass on a whole raft of legislation aimed at reforms after George Floyd. Yeah. They're
I wanted to ask you guys about that, how the Democrats in California basically failed on this legislative session. They punted on that bill. I have it in my doc, but I want to come back to that, gang, because it's September, y'all. We have an election in 2 months. This is insane. And are we at a point now where we are seeing these national polls tighten, even in certain swing states? The polls are tightening, even Joe Biden slipping a little bit behind in certain states in the upper Midwest. But are we still in a persuadable moment here? Are there people to be persuaded against Trump / for Biden? Or is this basically going to be a get out the vote kind of election? This is about who can turn out the most people, literally the most bodies, in order to win. Because it doesn't seem as though, I don't know if those people who voted for Obama in 2008 and then turned around and voted for Trump in 2016, I don't know if those people are still out there. Adriel, let me get your take on
Kim,
that.
The most frightening story I've seen this week, something that came up just yesterday, I believe it was announced that Health and Human Services has a contract out for $250 million for PR around COVID and trying to make a hopeful scenario for the recovery of the country. And so then my reaction to that was, it sounds like Donald Trump's going to run the Nixon campaign. He has Roger Stone freshly out of jail to help with the dirty tricks. That's all they've been doing, is ginning up violence with their 60,000 DHS, private police, federal police that they have to deploy in cities and cause violence, cause chaos. And then, meanwhile, our own taxpayer dollars are going to run the Obama campaign for President Trump, the Hope and Change campaign. We just cannot count him out. Now, in terms of persuadables, Ricci kind of gave a nod to this, in that the audience, I think, that Joe Biden is talking to is who the Democrats and the Republicans, or the Trumpers, think that they're going to persuade. That is like suburban women, people who are reacting to the message of fear, and he's trying to reassure, like, I'm going to be just as good, but less crazy, right? And when he says good, he means just as tough on the protesters, just as tough on people who are fighting for change. And I think that the challenge, right, is that then they expect the Democratic electorate to see enough in the platform or fear Trump enough that they're going to vote. And I don't think that's a GOTV strategy on the Biden campaign's part. It's much more about trying to keep this middle that they think Trump could pull away with the law and order messaging. It's very dangerous because there's not a lot going on from the Democrats to enlarge the electorate. And that's, I think that's what scares me. And I think that, it's a bummer that we are all hostage to needing to beat Trump because he is just so awful. And then we have this ticket that is not particularly inspiring. And Joe Biden's rhetoric continues to make it, uglier for the left.
One of the best things the Democrats might have going for them is that Trump has openly basically said that he's not going to accept the election results, right? He's openly said that if he loses, then that means the election is rigged. So that, honestly, I think is the best get out the vote message, that Trump's defeat has to be so massive that, any claim of rigged election, stolen election, which we know is going to happen, is not going to be believable. That is, I think, the path to victory for Democrats right now.
Well, let's talk about some of the potential legislation that could do something to affect police and police behavior and so-called police reform. I know that was an odd transition, my bad. But I wanted to get this story in before we sign off because SB 731 was proposed in the California State House by, I think it was Eloise Reyes, state senator. I think she was state senator from San Bernardino, a Democrat. Ricci, I know you've been following this. Can you give us a little brief synopsis of what SB 731 hoped to achieve and what happened to this bill this legislative session?
Yeah, so basic understanding is SB 731. If a cop is involved in a serious violent act, one time as a police officer, that it should expel them from being, like, if they shoot someone, they shouldn't be allowed to remain a police officer or go to a new city and get a job as a police officer. The police officer who shot Kenneth Ross Jr. in Gardena, California, while he was running in a park, they shot another black man in his back, as they do in Los Angeles. And but that officer hadn't been involved in shootings prior to the shooting with Kenneth Ross Jr. So SB 731 was a bill that was backed by Black Lives Matter LA. They did a lot of outreach and a lot of quote unquote lobbying to get that pushed through. And Kenneth Ross Jr.'s mom is a very active advocate for against police violence and specifically targeting the district attorney, Jackie Lacey. Jackie Lacey has refused to prosecute the 600 plus cops that have killed people here in Los Angeles over the past 7 years. And so that's what 731 was for. It was in the name of Kenneth Ross Jr. because he was shot and killed by someone who had shot someone else in another city and came to Gardena and shot and killed Kenneth Ross. But what happened was we have a super majority in Los Angeles of Democrats, right? And so this is what is so frustrating. Everyone here understands on this panel, but when people talk about Democrats and Republicans, what's the good of being a fucking Democrat if you can't get anything done? And the crazy thing is that they didn't even vote on SB 731 yesterday. They let that bill die. And it's just like a sign of cowardice. And all of those elected officials in Sacramento take money from the police lobbying forces. It's just like, it's disgusting what's going on. Assembly member Mike Gibson's a fucking coward. He's in District 64. He held out as a no vote pretty much for months and up until last night, and then suddenly said last night he was going to vote yes, but that was only until he knew that the bill wasn't going to come up for a vote. And so that's the type of cowardice that happens with California Democrats. Mike Gibson has taken over $100,000 from the police lobbying force, it's just ridiculous that bill didn't even get voted on. It's just these people should be ashamed of themselves, honestly.
I mean, Adriel, are these Kamala Harris type Democrats? Where?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I like sending our conservative Democrats to DC, where they are like a little bit more left in comparison to what goes on up there. But our supermajority is not delivering for the people. Our governor ran on Medicare for All, a bill called SB 562, and then when he got into power, just didn't do it. And this is what we see, like the Democrats have been passing single-payer healthcare in California since Schwarzenegger was governor, but they just only do it when they know it won't actually pass. So it's actually quite disgusting, quite cynical, and we need a lot of change in California. I'll leave it at that.
Jaisal, you wanted to hop in there because I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, real quick. I just wanted to say, I wasn't, just for the record, I wasn't suggesting that, Democrats are all on board with the defund the police movement or holding police accountable. What I am suggesting is that, now for the first time, this movement that's, for years been like a grassroots movement, grown through the work of activists and organizers around the country, especially Black women who have led this movement. This year it's really gone into the mainstream. And this year we've seen in states like in New York, and I'm sure in California, that, people want to know what candidates are taking donations from the FOP. This has become a central issue. So no one should expect things to change overnight, but in the next, 5 or 6 years, you can start seeing more, expect to see more races and, more bills calling for these changes. Maryland, for example, was the state that had the first law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights. And, 5 years after the uprising here,
45 states.
Yeah.
45 states have this bill that California Democrats didn't even vote on.
Yeah. But it's going to have to take a real reckoning within the Democratic Party to actually address this because, as we know, police enforce an unjust economic system. And, that's what impunity for cops is all about, protecting this system. And, and that is going to be one of the new dividing lines within the Democratic Party. Which side are you on?
And that's why you don't see these large police forces in suburbs where there is a much tighter income band. They're basically there to enforce rampant inequality because you have many poor service workers, you have unemployed folks, you have large numbers of homeless people in our cities, and then you also have these magnificent downtowns that are financial centers and centers of government power, and then massive police forces.
Guys, we are 2 minutes away from the bottom of the hour, and there was some other stuff I wanted us to get to, including footage from both Washington, D.C. and Portland, Oregon of a lot of the street aid people, the street medics, the food vendors. Police have been ruthlessly attacking these people as they've been trying to render aid to those who've been injured. They've been destroying their medical supplies, their people who've been cooking, giving out free food to protesters. I mean, the police have just been acting like straight up barbarians, but we don't have time for that. But I will leave you all with this clip from last week. It was on the final night of the Republican National Convention as Donald Trump accepted the the RNC's nomination to be the Grand Wizard. To be the president of the United States. And obviously, they couldn't have a lot of these things in person, but they did have a big final rally at the White House where all these people were. And upon exiting the White House, walking through Northwest Washington, D.C., Kentucky Senator Rand Paul got a greeting from a lot of the protesters, the hundreds, the thousands of people that had gathered downtown D.C. to make their voices heard, to try to drown out Trump from the White House lawn, garden, wherever in the hell Trump was spouting off his nonsense. So let's take a look at Rand Paul getting the business from the people out in the streets. Let's look at that.
Say her name! Say her name! Say her name! Say her name! Y'all can take pictures and all that, but y'all gotta give us a move, please. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Move back! You move the fuck back! Can you see it? Move back! Move back! Back up, please. Watch out, bro.
Man, Randy was running like his next door neighbor had just run up on him for cutting them hedges up without permission. A lot of the protesters were out there screaming at Rand Paul to say her name. Her name, of course, being the name of Breonna Taylor, who was shot and killed by Louisville police, obviously Rand Paul's home state there. Panel, real quick, this clip is getting a lot of flack from Republican circles. Even I think President Trump commented on this, saying that the behavior was disgraceful by protesters for accosting Rand Paul. There's got to be some fucking consequence for all this bullshit and inaction that these lawmakers are doing / not doing in Washington, D.C. Adriel, is it appropriate to scream at sitting senators about the failure to charge police in the killing of an unarmed civilian in their state? Is this in bounds in your opinion?
No, I think it's in bounds, like when McConnell was screamed at inside a restaurant and everyone said that was wrong. I think that the thing that concerns me right now is that the Republicans have a stronger media apparatus than we do, and the liberals aren't doing very well either. And so they're able to spin this. And you saw Rand Paul follow. I got to show off my shirt in the last minute. We had Rand Paul then make a big media circuit and really paint this picture the way he wanted people to see it, almost like it was a setup.
Ricci, what's your take on
I would say that that's how all elected officials from a local, state, and federal level should be approached when they act with such cowardice, such as Rand Paul. I would love for Mayor Eric Garcetti to show his face in public and see what kind of feedback he gets from the public. I think these people should be made uncomfortable every single time they leave their home.
Jaisal, we saw something similar happen in Baltimore around the time of the mayoral election or the Democratic primary, where candidate at the time, Thiru Vignargarash, remember when they ran up on him with the middle finger to the law chant? That shit was glorious. What is your take about what we just saw here with Senator Randy Paul?
So I mentioned, I was talking about earlier. So he appeared on Fox News this morning, and it said these protesters that confronted him were shipped in on a plane, and dropping hints of like a QAnon, anti-Semitic theory, saying these are paid protesters, which, totally fitting into, building off what Trump said last night about how they've uncovered evidence of this plot without any evidence. First thing I find hilarious is that Rand Paul, a supposed libertarian, is calling for the jailing of protesters for exercising their freedom of speech. And, as was talked about earlier, screaming at a politician is not violence. Allowing police to kill Black people in the street, that is violence. Cutting off, unemployment assistance for millions of Americans, the 50 million people that were unemployed, that is violence. Allowing the eviction moratorium to expand, that is violence. Having 12 million people that have lost their health care because they're unemployed, that is violence. So, we know Joe Biden isn't a radical, but a lot of people feel like he has missed an opportunity to talk about what real structural violence is in this country. But again, right, we have this right-wing media, that sets the agenda, which the Democrats are, there's a lot going on there as far as why Biden is doing this. But it gives us a lot of room to talk about it and try to explain things to people and contextualize things. So that's why I'm glad I've had this opportunity to share this time with you guys, because we're able to sort of
explain it to me, because the shit don't make no sense to me. I'm the first one you need to explain it to, because I am in a constant state of being aghast by what I'm seeing, but also having sense enough to know that this is America. This is the shit.
We're all gonna have Bidenitis by the time this is over.
Exactly.
Chronic Bidenitis.
I'm so sick. I'm so tired of it. But here we go. We're about to be into the home stretch of this godforsaken election. So hopefully, Lord, 2020 will be over and 2021 will be way, way better. But guys, that's it. That's our time. I appreciate everyone joining us today. Senior correspondent from The Real News, Jaisal Noor, from the People's City Council of Los Angeles, Ricci Sergienko, and the future socialist governor of California. He is here to give Gavin Newsom the business. Adriel Hampton. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you joining us today. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome back anytime. And
Jaisal,
listen,
pleasure to be on with you.
Thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate it. We'll see you back here on Thursday for Stir Crazy. Again, questions, comments, concerns, stircrazy@therealnews.com. Y'all have a great rest of your Tuesday evening. We'll see you Thursday, gang. See you. Bye.